Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Riza Diaz.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
Former President Rodrigo Duterte, together with his longtime aide and now Senator Bongo, are facing a second plunder case. This is once again courtesy of their staunch critic, former Senator Antonio "Sonny" Trillanes.
Trillanes alleged that Duterte and Go intervened in the 16 billion peso frigate acquisition project back in 2017 and that they received millions of pesos in kickback as a result.
Now, it's something Trillanes actually already alleged years back, prompting Go to say Trillanes is politicking once again. Camille Samonte with a big story tonight.
The charges keep coming for the Dutertes. Today, former Senator Antonio Trillanes filed a second plunder case against former President Rodrigo Duterte. This is in connection with the allegedly anomalous 16 billion peso purchase of Philippine Navy frigates back in 2017, which also involved then Special Assistant to the President and now sitting Senator Bongo. Go is also one of the respondents in Trillanes' plunder complaint. Trillanes claimed that Duterte, through Go, and the other respondents actively interfered in the negotiations and execution of the frigate acquisition project to favor South Korean company Hyundai Heavy Industries. Trillanes added that the respondents were able to pocket at least 50 million pesos from the company for the favor.
Nagbigay ng specifications ang Philippine Navy na kung ano ang kailangan nila na gamit. At ito ay dinaan sa bidding process. Pero nung nanalo na sa bidding, biglang iniiba nung kontratista yung mga nakalagay dun sa napag-usapan. At dahil sa kanilang mga contacts, no, in this particular case, si Bongo at si Duterte, ay pinilipit nila yung kamay ng Philippine Navy para lunukin at tanggapin yung mga pabor dun sa private contractor.
Trillanes also claimed that Duterte had former Navy Chief Vice Admiral Ronald Joseph Mercado dismissed from duty for opposing the changes in the contract. Mercado and Duterte's Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana have since denied Go's involvement in the project. The allegations are nothing new though. Trillanes made the same claim years back and the issue was tackled at a Senate inquiry at one point. In response, Senator Bongo said the issue is being rehashed and recycled for obvious political reasons. He adds, quote, "This is a clear case of destructive politics and sure sign of desperation out to malign me and the former president. Nevertheless, I welcome these moves to finally put an end to these lies." Also a familiar name in the list of respondents is former Budget Procurement Service Executive Lloyd Christopher Lau. Lau at some point also worked under the presidential management staff of the Office of the Special Assistant to the President. He is currently facing graft charges over the Farmally scandal.
Yan si Christopher Lau, bagman niya ni Bongo, no? At siya ang unang humarap dun sa mga Navy officers at tinutulak yun nga yung proposal nung private contractor para baguhin yung mga equipment na ibibigay dun sa Navy. Tapos ito nga sila eventually nilipat nila dun sa DBM. At kung ano-anong klaseng anomalous contracts ang pinasok nito. Bagman si Christopher Lau ni Bongo at si Bongo naman bagman ni Duterte. Kaya magkakadugtong ang bitukan niya.
Trillanes says he is still studying other possible cases that could be filed against Duterte. Last month, he filed plunder, graft, and corruption charges against the former president over infrastructure projects allegedly awarded to Senator Bongo's family.
Napakarami talagang ginawang anomalya, no? Kung nagugulat yung mga kababayan natin, bakit palaging nagpa-file lang ng kaso? Kasi ngayon lang po tayo nagkaroon ng pagkakataon na mag-file dahil siguradong iwa-whitewash nila yon, i-railroad nila kung na-file man yan nung panahon ni Duterte.
As of press time, One News is still trying to get a response from the former president, but this would be the third criminal case filed against him since his term ended in 2022. The first was filed by Representative Franz Castro in 2023 over grave threats, but that was dismissed by the courts over insufficient evidence. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
Speaking
It should free her up to speak more
Right.
openly
And then
against
be
the
the
administration.
fiscalizer.
Ito na nga,
Yeah.
this is the first statement that they had
That's
been
a
anticipating.
mouthful.
It is a
It is
very
rather
strong
long.
words. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
quite long. It was quite long.
Well, speaking of former President Duterte, he and Senator Bato de la Rosa will be invited to the joint hearings of 4 lower house committees on various issues, including POGOs and the drug war. The 4 committees are dangerous drugs, public order and safety, public accounts, and human rights, a grouping they call the Quadcom. Now, Dangerous Drugs Committee Chair Representative Ace Barbers says these 4 banded together because they're investigating overlapping issues and insisted this wasn't a way to politically target Dutertes.
Ito politika, hindi ito related sa political persecution. Ginagawa lang po namin ang trabaho namin nang sa ganun ay maiayos natin yung mga ahensya ng gobyerno at mga kawani ng gobyerno na tiwali.
Lawmakers say they're also looking to find out whether the police involved in the drug war benefited in any way from POGOs.
There might be a quota system in the Philippine National Police, number one. Although dinideny ito ng iba, no? Pero ibang mga pulis na sabi nila to. Sa reward system na yan, kapag nakapatay ka ng drug pusher, may reward ka. Nalaman namin na this is a testimony of one of the policemen that we have, officers. From 20,000 to 60,000 yung binabayad yan. You see, yan testimony. We'd like to find out why. We'd like to find out saan nanggagaling ang pera. Sapagkat nalaman namin, nanggagaling yan sa Pogo money. Nanggagaling sa gambling money yan.
Senator Bato de la Rosa also dropped a bombshell today. He says House Speaker Martin Romualdez and Appropriations Chair Azaldi Co have been talking to the other PNP officials that have been supposedly tagged as suspects by the ICC to convince them to testify against himself, Bato, and former President Duterte.
I have a very, very reliable information, an A1 information, na yung mga opisyal na yan ay kinausap. Ang nagdala sa kanila si General Dick De Leon, yung Director General ng NICA. Kasama si Trillanes. At andoon sa kanilang pag-uusap Nandoon si Speaker Martin Romualdez at si Appropriations Chairman ng Lower House na si Bicol Party List na si Congressman Saldico. In those different instances, hindi sila sabay-sabay kinausap isa-isa. In those different instances, nandoon yung sila.
To convince them.
To convince them to execute an affidavit implicating President Duterte and me to the ICC.
Sino-sino nga
Wala sa warrant ha. Nasa listahan ng accordingly ng ICC na inimbestigahan. Suspect.
The four other men in the ICC's list, according to former Senator Sonny Trillanes, are former PNP Chief Oscar Albayalde, former CIDG Chief Romeo Karamat Jr., former National Police Commission Commissioner Edilberto Leonardo, and former PNP Intelligence Officer Eleazar Mata. Senator De La Rosa says these four men were spoken to separately, one by one, and by the same group led by National Intelligence Coordinating Agency Director General Dick De Leon and former Senator Trillanes. And again, he claims Speaker Romualdez and Representative Zaldico were present each time. Senator De La Rosa says he feels like he's been stabbed in the back.
The same government is telling now we are not recognizing them. But still, the same government is doing the legwork for ICC. Erase ang Duterte at kanyang mga alay from the face of the earth. Ano pa ang rason? Mahirap mag-speculate dahil tila iba yung sinasabi ni Presidente, pero iba yung ginagawa ng kanyang mga tao na kapalibot sa kanya. Diba? Contradicting. Very contradicting. Pwede pa sa Diyos ko na lang lahat. What will happen to me? Bahala na si Lord.
Feels like it's a bit of an open warfare now. Staying in politics, a recent survey by OCTA Research showed the number of Filipinos identifying as pro-Marcos has increased to 36% from 31% in March. On the other hand, those identifying as pro-Duterte slipped 4 percentage points to 16%. 31% of Filipinos identified as independents, meaning they neither supported the administration nor the Dutertes nor the opposition. That figure is up 2 points from March. Meanwhile, support for the opposition increased by a point to 5%. This survey was conducted from June 26 to July 1st, 2024, with 1,200 respondents. Support for the president was highest in the National Capital Region at 43% and perhaps not surprisingly lowest in Mindanao at 25%. Conversely, support for the Dutertes was highest in Mindanao at 50% and lowest in balanced Luzon at 5%. Among socioeconomic classes, at least 40% of pro-Marcos supporters came from classes A, B, and C, while the Dutertes garnered the most support from Class E at 33%. Let's try to flesh this out further with OCTA President Ranjit Rai, who joins us now live via Zoom. Professor Rai, good evening. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening, ladies. Good evening to all our televiewers. Thank you for inviting OCTA to present its data.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's much room for speculation, but only you can tell us what's going on behind these numbers. And first off, I want you to put into context the headline figure for us. Those identifying as pro-Marcos has increased to 36%. That's up from 31% in March. On the other hand, those identifying as pro-Duterte slipped 4 percentage points to 16% in this latest survey. What should we make of that?
Well, the results are, plain and simple, really, to interpret in a sense. This is part of a probe that we've started in the first quarter of this year, and hopefully we'll continue tracking these numbers over some time. The idea here is to try to start probes on political preference. But in our country, it's very hard to do studies of this nature because our politics is not disciplined by program, platform, or ideas. it's more disciplined around personalities, partisanship based on, and of course, families, no? And, parochial interests, no? That are defined by regional groupings, et cetera, ethno-linguistic groupings. No? So when we designed this survey, we tried to ask a basic question, no? Which of the following best describes your political preference? And the Filipino question is, alin sa mga sumusunod ang pinaka naglalarawan ng sinusuportahan nyo sa politika? So this is this was structured with a certain set of categories. And the first category was, of course, I support President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and his administration. And we were very clear to those who were interviewing that they were to be categorized as pro-Marcos. Then the next, of course, category is I support the Duterte family and their political alliance. No? The next, of course, is I support the opposition. We define the opposition as the traditional opposition. Checking with the Liberal Party and certain personalities. No? And of course, what we call the independents. And you'll notice there are a lot of independents as far as our political preference, as far as our adult Filipino political preference is concerned. Yeah.
Okay,
We
Professor,
apologize for the over.
Yeah, I know.
We're trying to fix some technical issues in the background. We apologize for that extra audio that you're hearing right
I
now.
think we are good. Maria, are we good?
Independents, no? 31%.
Okay.
Now, if you include those who refuse to answer, that's around 42% of all those we surveyed are basically independent and are ambivalent as far as the political preference. So that means there's a lot of people who are still waiting to, hoping that there'll be some sort of political change, some sort of new leadership that will come out, some sort of movement to follow. And they don't align themselves with the current political forces that are dominant in our politics today. So I think that some level, if that's all, and hopeful as far as our politics is concerned.
Okay, we apologize again, Professor Rai. We are trying to fix your audio. Something is coming in that is not supposed to. Okay, but what I'm actually curious, because this is actually the first, I know you've done the survey before in March, but this time around, this was conducted June 29 to July 1, and that was
June
after
26 to July
June
1.
26 to July 1. And this was the time after Vice President Sara Duterte resigned from the cabinet, signaling, of course, the big breakup within the unit team. And so all bets are off, the gloves are on. What is this figure saying? There, 31% neither support the Dutertes nor the Marcoses. And what are you seeing for the opposition? Is this something that they could capitalize on?
I think so. I believe so, because this is a segment of our population that does not identify themselves with the dominant political forces in power today. And I'm sure they're looking for a new leader, a new movement to follow, new politics to emerge. And they're quite a significant number, no? When you look at this number, they're significant in the National Capital Region, a vote-rich area, and the balanced Luzon. They're also very significant in Visayas at 41%. So nearly all, almost half of respondents in the Visayas, when we did the survey, basically categorized themselves as independents. So there are many myriad reasons for this. Some of them probably are sick and tired of the political noise, are disappointed with the performance of the administration on many issues, and don't see any hope, with the Duterte family, in a sense, or see any hope with the traditional opposition the way it is configured at the moment.
The number of people identifying as pro-Marcos, or rather as pro-Duterte, slipped 4 points, while the number of those identifying as pro-Marcos jumped 5 points. How should we read those two figures? Does that mean that the number, there are previously Duterte supporters who crossed over to the Marcos side, or that's not necessarily the case? Kasi it's almost equivalent, plus -4 and then +5. So how should we read that figures?
When you look at the data I provided, you guys and the media, it could be a lot of reasons, a lot of factors, no, that enable the significant increase in the numbers or a jump in the numbers of those who classify themselves or prefer to be called pro-Marcos. One thing's for sure, if you look at the data, the pro-Marcos category increased a lot in balanced Luzon. There was a 10-point increase. It held on to a very high number in the National Capital Region. It decreased slightly in what you call this, Visayas, and increased by nearly 10 points in Mindanao. So, one could argue that this is probably because of the rollout of government programs, the interventions, especially in the first quarter, that had to do a lot with responding to, the heat wave, El Nino, the response to rising inflation at that time, and of course, growing hunger and poverty in both the Visayas and Mindanao. So there was, you could explain it that way. Another, of course, is that when you look at the category pro-Duterte, the numbers really slipped significantly in balanced Luzon and in the National Capital Region. One could attribute that to the political noise, possibly. They also went down in the Visayas. Where there was nominal change was really in Mindanao, where I think the numbers are consolidated, something like 50%. Basically prefer the brand. If you talk about these categories, we can talk about them as brands, to make it simpler. So the Marcos brand gained a lot this quarter, and it has to do really with the response of government to the pressing issues affecting many Filipinos. But it has to be emphasized. It's 36%. 31% are actually independents. And if you include those who refuse, who don't want to be categorized, who haven't chosen a brand, that's 42% of our population, our adult population, who basically do not see themselves, or accept the brands Marcos, Duterte, or the opposition. So that's something that's significant, and you find a lot of them in balanced Luzon and the National Capital Region and the Visayas at 41%. So analysts will go over this data and see, from a political tactical point of view. But I guess OCTA's goal here was to just start a survey to look at political preference. Very hard to do a survey of this nature in our country because we're not categorized along political parties. As I was saying, platform and ideology. We're really organized around families, personalities, and ethno-linguistic groups. And when you look at the survey, these sort of mirror these traditional images of Philippine politics. You'll see that the Marcos brand is very strong in Luzon and the National Capital Region, specifically very strong in northern Luzon, in the Ilocos areas. They're also strong where the Romualdez family is resonant, in the Visayas. But as the president has argued early this morning, if the government does not perform, these numbers will also go down. And that government's goal is really not to be popular, it's to do the right thing. And maybe the vice president's also right, The government should focus on trying to implement a master plan for flood control. So, the government has to perform to sustain these numbers. We're coming out with our trust and approval survey for top government officials by the end of this week. And maybe we'll see some sort of link between this probe and that. The big question is this a trend? Well, one could argue yes, there's a downward trend as far as the Duterte brand is concerned, and an upward trend as far as the Marcos brand is concerned. But this is just 2 quarters, so let's see if we can observe over a longer period of time. But then again, these are sensitive really to what the government intends to do. No, I think the Marcos brand benefits a lot if government is able to implement their development, their socioeconomic and development programs. And if they're able to do that, these numbers, people will consolidate around them.
Okay, Professor, so you're basically saying the big ayuda rollouts are working so far, and then that's reflected in these results. But you did make a case, and you kind of mentioned it already, mentioning the bailiwicks, when traditionally, of course, the Dutertes, or at least before, the whole of Mindanao, obviously, and then somewhat the Visayas, because they're all Bisaya, right? But then here comes President Bongbong Marcos with a Bisaya mother and an Ilocano father, so he takes Luzon and the Visayas. What can you say about traditional bailiwicks and Philippine politics? As a political analyst, do you see these things still coming into play, or is the game changing, really, when it comes to traditional bailiwicks?
You touched on it already a little bit by mentioning parochial politics, but talk us through it.
What seems to be clear from the data as of now is that Visayas is up for grabs. Right. And the Visayas, as a black box, I think when you look at the numbers, it really, the Marcos brand is still strong there. No? They have something like about 30% in that area. After the independence, the next biggest category is the Marcos brand. Those who want who prefer to be called pro-Marcos. So there's no. When it comes to the Dutertes, they're actually sleeping in that area in Visayas. And what seems to also be clear is they continue to be very influential in Mindanao. So the brand is still very strong in Mindanao, but only in Mindanao. Everywhere else, if you look at the survey, the granular data, they're actually slipping. It's on a downward trend everywhere. They lost more than 10 points in Balanced Luzon over a quarter. So, there are many reasons for that. It's possible the political noise. It's possible the resignation. It's possible it's an after effect of the formal, and very open breakup of the unit team, by her resignation. So it could be so many, reasons. We did not ask why, but hopefully through our own other probes, we can possibly provide or speculate on the reasons why these numbers are moving the way they are. Yeah. One thing's for sure. The Marcos brand did very well in Mindanao this quarter. That was almost a 10-point increase in an area where they traditionally have been quite weak. And so that's probably because of the interventions. No? You saw in the first and part of the second quarter, massive interventions by government in providing aid to our kababayans in Mindanao, especially those affected by El Nino.
And the floods.
And all these other programs that were rolled out as a stopgap measure over a particular period of time. So maybe that's why it bumped up nearly 10 points.
The numbers certainly tell an interesting story. We're going to have to leave that there for now. Thank you so much for your time once again, OCTA Research President, Professor Ranjit Rai.
Up next, President Marcos says the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program will continue despite a recommendation from 22 senators calling for its suspension. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here.
Welcome back. You are watching the big story here in One News. The Philippines, the United States, Canada, and Australia conducted multilateral maritime drills in the West Philippine Sea today. This unprecedented four-way sail is being held within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone until tomorrow. Joining the exercise were different naval and air assets, including the Philippines' BRP Jose Rizal and BRP Ramon Alcaraz. The joint sale involves landing operations, communications exercises, division tactics, and anti-submarine warfare exercises, among others. Top generals of the four countries said the activity is being held in a manner consistent with international law and that it is a demonstration of their commitment to support a free and open Indo-Pacific. The joint exercise was marred, though, with reports of China conducting its own combat patrol near Scarborough Shoal. But according to the AFP, initial reports indicate that there were no traces of Chinese military activity in Bajo de Masinloc. Aside from the usual illegal encroachment and presence of Chinese maritime militia vessels, the armed forces did not monitor any purported exercise or combat patrols. 3 Chinese Navy vessels, however, tailed the four-way exercise earlier today. The AFP said it will prioritize the safety of all personnel participating in this joint sale.
Meanwhile, in land transport, President Marcos has rejected the proposal to suspend the implementation of the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, even with Senate pushing for it. Maricel Halili has the story.
President Bongbong Marcos stood firm behind the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, or PUVMP, despite the Senate resolution calling for its suspension. 22 senators signed Senate Resolution 1096, which urged the government to temporarily suspend the implementation of the now-called Public Transport Modernization Program until all the concerns of jeepney drivers and operators are addressed. The resolution highlighted that there were just approximately 36,217 consolidated jeepneys. But in an interview with a Big Story last Wednesday, Transportation Undersecretary Andy Ortega said there were already around 150,000 consolidated jeepneys, or 83% of the total number of PUVs nationwide. Senators argued that unconsolidated units are mainly due to the government's inadequate information campaign to educate drivers, operators, and transport groups about the program, as well as the financial burden due to the prices of modern jeepneys. But President Marcos insists otherwise.
I disagree with them because sinasabi nila minadali. This has been postponed 7 times. The modernization has been postponed for 7 times.
The president added that only a small number of operators and drivers are complaining about the implementation of the program.
80% have already consolidated. So paano naman? Yung 20% ang magde-decide yung buhay ng 100%. So pakinggan natin yung majority. At ang majority sinasabi, ituloy natin.
Despite the president's stance, Senate President Chis Escudero maintained his position that the PTMP should be suspended. Among the basis for the senator's stand was a letter to the Senate from Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista, which stated that only half of the 8 billion peso budget for the program has been spent in its 6 years of operation.
6 years and yet 5% pa lang na dapat na ayuda nilang mabibigay ang nabigay na. 6 years and yet minority pa rin ang local manufacturer ng mga jeep na ito. Walang masama na magpreno. Kung gagamitin ko ang salita ng mga tsuper at jeepney, magpreno ng konti, magminor ng konti, hindi ba? Baliktanawan yung mga kakulangan pa na dapat at pwedeng punuan bago tuluyang umarangkada. Ika nga.
Escudero also emphasized the multiple postponements of the program. Recall that Jeepneys and UV Express that did not consolidate by April 30 consolidation deadline were allowed by the LTFRB to operate in over 2,500 routes with low consolidation rates. The Senate President, however, clarified that the Senate is not opposed to the PTMP.
Na-implement na, hindi pinapabawi ng Senado yan. Wala sa intensyon ng Senado yan. Wala rin sa intensyon ng Senadong pigilan yung programa.
The LTFRB has since expressed gratitude for the President's support of the modernization program. According to Chairman Teofilo Guadas III, the President's vision for a modernized transportation infrastructure are vital in addressing the evolving needs of our commuters and ensuring a more reliable and eco-friendly public transportation network. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.